Welcome, welcome to Mentoring 37 for April the 16th, 2019. This is the show about mentoring, all about mentoring, mentoring for the world. And my name is Dr. Stephen Hobbs. I am the Director of Certification for the International Mentoring Community, who is sponsoring Mentoring 37. And with me is Doug Lawrence, who is the Director of Education for the international mentoring community. And it's always a great pleasure to join you twice a month here on Mentoring 37. And one of the things that we always do on this video podcast is to read our definition of mentoring. And we do so because we want to keep reinforcing the definition, the words that we use to help to explain and describe mentoring. It's sort of like when you go to a meeting in the workplace, and if you restate the vision statement or mission statement at the very beginning of the meeting and tie the meeting back to that statement, it seems to solidify and bring some way of the pathway, bringing it together. And that's why we read out the definition. So Doug is the one who has the pleasure of reading out the definition, and we also offer a little tidbit or an idea that goes with that definition. So, Doug, it's over to you.
All right, thank you, and welcome everyone. So our definition is as follows. Mentoring is about a two-way, trusted arrangement in which the mentor and mentee can form a deeper and richer collaborative alliance, resulting in both learning and growing personally and professionally.
So any thought you want to share with us today about that definition?
Well, what I'm seeing with a lot of the research that I'm doing, I'm seeing bits and pieces of our definition now being accepted by a large part of the mentoring community. So you kind of go like, whoa, where did that come from? And it's actually part of the definition that we've put together. And we talk a lot about the paradigm shift in mentoring. So moving away from what we call the traditional style to the more effective mentoring, more modern mentoring, but it's all about a two-way trusted arrangement.
The Mentoring 37, this video podcast, is actually created around the sense of 37. So there are three main areas of the presentation, offering about 7 points per each of those main offerings. And the main offerings are to explore one of the action outcome statements out of the Certificate of Competence profile, the Certificate of Competence mentor profile. The second one is to go over a question that's been found, and Doug is great at going and looking for things, and he actually does a lot of responding in the platform called Quora. So I think he has another one from Quora today, and he'll be sharing that. So that's the second offering. And the third offering is to update you on what's going on in the world of mentoring. Now, some of that is about what we're doing through the international mentoring community, and some of that is also bits and pieces that we're picking up. And today we've got an interesting one from Doug's perspective, and it's about male and female and the connection to mentoring, and it's the research he's doing. And this is really a great and timely episode to just introduce that and at a very high level. So that's one of the parts of the third offering. The other element of Mentoring 37 is that we are inviting you into the community, so that what you can do is help us to co-create that community. Now, this is not just about Doug and I. It's also about creating a community that is going to help us to grow mentoring, about mentoring for the world. And that happens because we create a community. And if it all works out according to plan and the map, is that we'll create a mentoring movement. And that is an important element, I believe, in all aspects of our workplace, our work life, and it's very much into the youth mentoring at this point in time. So it's to actually really, really strengthen and focus that movement around mentoring. And the other aspect of Mentoring 37 is that we want to use collaborative conversations here, and you'll notice that Doug and I have a collaborative conversation, and we'll go back and forth. We always do that with whoever we're interacting with. When we're helping bring people on board, or what we actually call inbound, to bring them on board into the mentoring certification system, we're having collaborative conversations, and we encourage mentors and mentees to have collaborative conversations. So that is one of the ground pieces of our work. That's an introduction to the video podcast. And the other thing that we're going to do is we're going to move into the first offering. And this is a great way to emphasize that there's 68 action outcomes in the Certificate of Competence mentor profile. And we pick up on one or two or three of them at a time and elaborate on them. And we use the videos in our online courses, and also through the podcast, and then up onto YouTube, is that you get a chance to hear a little bit more about that action outcome. And today what we've done is we've selected use reflective practices for formative evaluation. So I'm the one who's going to share a little bit more information about that, and then I'm going to invite Doug to jump in. So to be able to get this started, one of the things that is important here is that this action outcome statement, use reflective practices for formative evaluation, is more to do with the mentoring arrangement. In other words, it is led by the mentor. Now, in a mentoring relationship, that tends to be led by the mentee. But today's action outcome is about the mentoring arrangement. And what I want to do is just break down some of the key words that are here. And the first one that I'd like to start with is evaluation. Evaluation is one of those really important elements of the workplace, and it tends to be thought about at the end of something. And one of the pieces that I'd like to really emphasize today is evaluation needs to be built in across the whole project, and in this case, the mentoring arrangement. It's there from the start to the end. And the formative part of it is what's important here, because evaluation is about to improve something that's in motion, that is already in use. And the formative part is to form, to continue to form, to give feed forward, to be able to improve, focus, and strengthen, in this case, the mentoring arrangement. So it helps to form it up. And it's to continue people on the path to know, yeah, this is the path we want to go on. It could be to improve the tools that you're using in the arrangement. And that's an important element as well. So it's very much about this inform to improve what is actually going on at this point in time. So that's the evaluation, formative evaluation element. But there's something I want to just make a comparison here called the summative evaluation. Summative, summary, is that there's a point in time where you've got to summarize what's happened, and that's the summative evaluation. What is it that you've learned as a result of doing it? And so at the end of a mentoring arrangement, you would do a summative evaluation and sort of look at what it is that you've learned, how you've advanced yourself, whether as a mentor, as a mentee, because it is a two-way trusted arrangement. And that is an important element. So I just make that distinction. So formative evaluation is continuously happening. Summative tends to be at the end. Now, that's a high level. You can dive into those two terms a little bit more, but that's a good start for us here at this point in time. Now, the reflective practices piece. Now, herein is where we've got to really pay some attention, because reflection is about giving due consideration, considerable thought to something. It's not just a whimsical, oh yeah, that seems to be fine. No, it's a little bit deeper. You'll hear language from Doug and I that goes sort of deeper and richer about what's happening. And in the reflection, it's that deeper reflection that is taking place. And therefore, there's practices that are associated with it. And there are a number of different kind of practices that you can use. And I'm just going to give you a very simple one at this point. And it's one that I use all the time. And it's really 3 questions, and they go like this. So what? Now what? What else? And the so what is really about, well, where do we go from here? The now what is, what are we actually going to do? And what else is just to remind ourselves, did we cover all of what we need to cover right now? Or, oh, hey, maybe let's just go back and relook at this piece. And that's that formative element. Let's just go back and relook at this and make sure it's the pathway, the tools that we want to follow. Now, there's 2 types of reflection, and we could go into these deeper and deeper and deeper, but I'm just going to give you a highlight here. And then in the show notes, the show more, there's a Wikipedia site that is listed on the video where it gives you a little bit more information on reflective practices. Now, the 2 elements I want to give you is what's called reflection in and reflection on. Reflection in is when you're in the mentoring arrangement. Let's tie it back to mentoring. And you're reflecting in what's going on, and you're looking and feeling and sensing what's taking place. Reflection on is usually you're taking a look back at what's taken place and say, oh, okay, this is what happened, and what did I learn from that? However, one of the things that Doug and I always chat about is, can you get to a point where reflection in and reflection on are happening at the same time? Now, that is a lot of practice. I'm still working on it, but there are times when in my facilitative mentoring I'm doing with people like, oh, hang on, I'm actually doing reflection in and reflection on. This is great, because I'm in there, but I'm also sort of standing and looking at what's taking place and going, wow, this is really interesting. And I get an opportunity to leverage both ways of looking at the consideration, the deeper thinking about what's taking place. And I think that that's a really great element to practice as a mentor. Now, Doug, I know you probably have some thoughts you want to add, and then one of the things I'd like to do is just take a look at a list of benefits around this reflective practice and mentoring. So any thoughts you want to share at this point?
Just the aspect of how important, and we've already talked about that, but is how important reflection is as part of the mentoring process and part of your, as a mentor, it's part of your continuous learning that you need to be doing on a constant basis, continuous learning. So like for me, and I think of a particular example where I was working with an individual that was very, very closed off, wasn't open to sharing a lot of what the challenges were personally and professionally that they were dealing with. And I used storytelling as a means to be able to break that wall down. And once I started to do that, then he was a lot more receptive to sharing some of the challenges personally and professionally that he was dealing with. And I came at it from, at the end of the mentoring session, as I was leaving and heading home, I always ask myself 3 questions, similar to what you had talked about. Mine are the ones that I use that work well for me is what went well, what didn't go well, and what will I do differently next year, hence the continuous learning. And when I took and reflected back on the conversation he and I had, I saw that he was somewhat intimidated by the mentoring process. And so I had to I had to reflect forward to be able to say, so now what am I going to do to help alleviate his concern and create that safe place for him to be able to share what we needed to get to. And so that's, from my perspective, that's where that kind of all fits in.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And I think that's a great segue. And I've got a series of benefits, and I'm going to read some of them. I'm not going to read them all, but they will be in the show more or show notes and on our blogs. But I'm just going to highlight a couple of them. And again, I might pause just a little bit. So if you want to add something, Doug, just jump on in. Okay, sound great?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. All right, one of the first things, and we've alluded to this already, is the benefits of this reflective practice, this formative evaluation, is it increases the learning from an experience or a situation for both the mentor and the mentee. And another one is that it promotes a deeper learning, because there's a learning that takes place, but there's a deeper learning when you get into that reflective practice. You really start to dive into it, that really pulls it out for you. And I know Doug and I have lots of chats about that one. Another one is that it certainly identifies your strengths and areas for improvement. And we can always improve our mentoring arrangement. I've been at it for a while. Doug's been at it for a while. And when we have conversations every once in a while, I just learned this the other day, and I'm going, hey, I'm going to add this to the, we have this sort of, oh, wow, this is kind of neat. When you get to share it with someone, like what we're attempting to do in the community, then it's of great importance and value to everyone. There's another one here, which is it increases your contribution from confidence. So from a confidence point of view, when you get an opportunity to do that reflection and that evaluation, it actually gives you a sense, oh, this is working. My contribution is working. Hey, this is great. I can do more of this. I can continue to learn. I can continue to improve. And that's an excellent step forward as well. And the next one, and I'll leave it at this, and I know there's another 5 or 6 that we could go over, but this is one that came to me a little bit later when I was actually creating the show notes for the show, which is this reflective practice, this continuous evaluation, can actually suggest a reimagined arrangement, a reimagined relationship, and a reimagined agreement. Because you may be into it and you want to, hang on a minute, let's look at the arrangement. Let's look at the relationship. Let's look at the agreement. And do they still hold true? Because you might be into it for a year, you might be into it 6 months, heck, might be into it in a month, and you need to do a little bit of a shift and have a conversation. So Doug, those are some of mine. Is there anything of importance that you would see that you would want to add as a benefit of reflective practice and continuous evaluation?
There's one additional one that jumped out at me, and that was the further understanding of your own, so you as a mentor, your own beliefs, attitudes, and values. And I think understanding that and continuing to be open and flexible enough to know that those may very well change over time, depending on, obviously the volume of mentoring that you do, the type of mentoring that you're doing, so the different situations that you're presented with. So I think being open and flexible to that deeper understanding of what those are is really important.
Well, for sure. And I'm putting up my hand. If you're listening on the podcast, you can see it in the video. I'm putting up my hand, and I know that's true. and I've so appreciated those mentees who have been in my life and my own mentors, because that has just been a deep and rich experience. So that's a great one to remind us. So thank you. So this is the second part of the show, which is moving into, we get questions. Sometimes we can answer them really quickly. Sometimes Doug goes out and gets a Quora question. Whatever way, we answer them as quickly as we can. And Doug is getting really quite known, I think, on Quora, Doug, aren't you, for answering questions about mentoring? I think you just about answer every one of them that shows up on Quora. Isn't that true?
Pretty much, yeah. I've been recognized in two areas, mentoring and mentors, as a top viewed, in the top 10 viewed contributors. And also I just recently saw I was actually #1 in business mentoring. So
there you go.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm truly blessed in that, people do pose questions and they get sent to me, and I'm given that opportunity to be able to respond and, to share. And I've actually had some people come back with some interesting questions in addition to what I had already proposed and that. So it's an interesting journey.
Yeah. One of the things that we're doing before we actually move into the question you've got from Quora is we're thinking about actually publishing a book based on Doug's answers to Quoras, because Quora questions. I think it would be kind of a fun one it'll be a quick, snappy little action outcome book that you can probably read in, an hour, but get, I hadn't thought of it that way. I haven't thought of it that way. And that would be helpful. But I think right now, Doug, why don't we just, segue right into the Quora question that you have.
Okay, so the question that I was presented with is, how do you mentor or help that one person who is always judgmental and pointing out the flaws of their coworkers? So it's an interesting thing to have somebody actually identify that, because right away my response going back was, my first question going back would be whether or not this person is open to constructive feedback themselves before they actually pass judgment on others. So it's really, that's something to consider. A large part of the challenge is the lack of communication skills in situations like this. One of the things that we teach through the mentoring process is the art of effective communication, which would work well in this particular case. Using the pause technique and asking yourself, how is what I'm about to say going to be received, is a great place to start the conversation. If you have any doubt that it will not be received in the right context, then perhaps it's time to reword. This process works really well and enhances people's communication skills. Yeah, and I guess I look at it from the aspect of communication as two-way. But also from what I'm seeing with a lot of the work that I'm doing is, we talked about this before, the mentor versus termination service that we offer, and that one of the things that I find is that it is a two-way street. So in a workplace mentoring situation where the employee is deemed as being sort of the challenge, if you dig a little deeper, you'll find that it's not only the employee that has communication issues, but it's also the manager and the management as well. And so then it's giving both sides of that equation, giving them the tools that they need to communicate more effectively for the betterment of all, right? And it all comes down to, if everybody's in alignment, the organization is more productive. If everybody is not aligned, then we're not as productive as what we could be.
For sure. And I think one of the tools to add to this is buy yourself a mirror. I think that's pretty self-explanatory, because when you start going, I've got this to say about this, move the mirror in front. Just go, hang on a minute. Whoa, hey. Right? Because there's a lot to be said about what you're saying about others is actually running around inside of you. So, yeah. Okay, well, thanks for that. Appreciate that. Again, another great question from the Quora world, and thanks for sharing your response. What we're going to do now is move into the third part of the show, where we're going to give some updates about what's happening. And one of the things that I'll keep mentioning is that there is a self-assessment for the CFC, the Certificate of Competence Mentor. And if you go to wealthmovement.com/mentor, and that's WELLTH movement.com/mentor, you can find the buttons that take you on to where you get the self-assessment from. So that's a really great start. What really happens with that is when you complete that self-assessment, you have the option of then grabbing 15 minutes with Doug to just go over what your responses are and what might be the pathway to follow. So you can't go wrong with that, folks, when you get that kind of opportunity. And I just thought it'd be kind of fun to update you where we are. And on the show that's the last show of every month of Mentoring 37 is just where are we with enrollments and certificate issues. And we've had 21 people enroll in the Certificate of Achievement Mentoring, which is the knowledge-based one. And we've issued 3 certifications at this point in time. And we have 3 people in the Certificate of Competence Mentor, of which we've issued 1 certificate. So that just gives you a sense. So total 24 enrollments. 1 person did both, but it still will count it as 24. And we've issued 4 certificates. So we are moving along. We are finding proof of concept, and that is just a great continuation of what it is that we're doing. One of the things that I wanted to mention is there's something happening in the news, and it's mainly out of the HR news, is that I'm seeing a few references to linking mentoring and dealing with distress in the workplace. I found this kind of interesting. Now, they may be using the word stress. I prefer distress because stress in and of itself is actually part of us as human beings, and distress is that which some people would call negative. Eustress or EU stress is that which people call positive. So in this case, it's about mentoring in distress. And one of the things, if you find yourself in distress, the article was suggesting is mentor someone. And I sat back and I went, actually, I'd never thought of it that way as a potential benefit of mentoring. Is it's a way to deal with the distress because you're mentoring someone. And then I dug around it a little bit deeper, reflective practice, what we're talking about. And I went, it actually gives you a chance to touch your own lived experience, right? What's happening in your career, because you're going to help someone else. It gives you a sense of what is it that is distressing you? What is it that is influencing you? And that could actually be passed along as part of the mentoring arrangement in a mentoring relationship. So it's very much a win-grow for both people. And I know that it would be particularly important to youth mentoring and mentoring people who are coming to your country, new immigrants to the country, and how you help mentor people. And while they're under probably some distress, and it's just sort of like a reverse of, well, you may not be distressed, but they are, and empathizing with them and understanding that you can help them deal with their distress. And again, that's a win-grow. So there was a lot of quick little nuggets that came out of that reference to mentoring and distress. So I just wanted to share it with you because it seemed to be timely, and it was linked to the action outcome that we were talking about earlier. Now, one of the other things that I mentioned at the beginning of the show was that Doug is doing some research. And Doug, you want to just share with us where you're going and what's happening? Because I know you're into it. You don't have it all nailed by this point in time, but where are you? What's going on with the topic of?
Well, it's a combination. So you can kind of slice this a couple different ways. But so one of the questions, and sort of where this came from, one of the questions, 2 places. The first was the differences between male mentors and female mentors. And it was a question that I posed for the mentoring circle. It'll be 2 weeks ago this coming Saturday. So I posed that. The other was, as we dug a little deeper, We got into the conversation around gender and what does that mean and all of that. But it actually was ironically posted as a question on Quora, is it relevant to consider gender when considering a mentor? And so I had gone back with some basic thoughts, and one of the ones was some mentor program managers are reluctant to match males with females and vice versa. So that's a point. Part of this could be due to the hashtag #MeToo movement, because there is a fear on the part of a lot of males not wanting to mentor females. And so there's obviously that. There is a lack of training today for mentors to address this particular topic. I know we deal with it, but not everybody does. In my own personal mentoring practice, the large majority of the people I work with in a mentoring arrangement are female, and I actually have 21 female clients to 11 male clients. So, and I went on through, obviously there was some other points and stuff that I had talked about, but that's kind of the where and sort of the why, is that there's a lot of interest around, should I get a male mentor, should I get a female, so on and so forth. And what's interesting is that if you do a query on Google, there's actually 44 million results on male versus female, and as far as the differences are concerned. A couple things that we're going to be continuing to explore are what they call similarity attraction, so male to male, female to female, and what does that mean? And I know that you mentioned earlier the talk about youth mentoring and that, and what's interesting is there's there is a concept that they call help seeking. So help seeking is a situation, and most of the stuff I read was primarily focused on youth, where boys actually view the mentoring as negative, and girls are actually seeking emotional help. So there's a lot more, obviously a lot more stones to overturn as I continue to explore this further, but the more I get into it, what I'm starting to see is what's starting to take shape is when we look at the hierarchy of mentoring, the mentor, the great mentor, the extraordinary mentor, the skill sets along that pendulum will start to shift, and the extraordinary mentor may be the person that is more comfortable or in working with both genders, right? But primarily I'm looking at it from what can I do to enhance those skill sets so that I bring more value to a mentoring arrangement when it is in fact a female mentee.
And I think you make a great point, is that there's a lot more to learn, to discover, explain. And this is just a tip. This is just one of those interest areas that came about because of a question that was asked of you. And so we have lots to learn. And even the language that we're using around it, is that the correct language? We don't know all of that at the moment. We're getting in there, and we're going to try and figure some of this out. And we invite who's ever listening, if you have some thoughts about this, please share them. And we'd love to hear from you. So yeah. And I guess as we move along, one of the other things that we're going to be doing a bit more research on, and this is Doug's going to be helping out, is that we're bringing some technology insights into the Mentoring37 show. And what's going to be taking place is Doug's going to be interviewing a gentleman who is associated with one of the software, the technology aspect of mentoring, and they're going to just be sharing some insights that they've gained. And it'll be Doug interviewing the person, and then that person responding, and then Doug sort of, oh, okay, so this is how this might work, and this how it might work, right? So that'll be coming up. I think we'll be starting that in May, isn't that, Doug?
Correct. Yeah.
So we can look forward to that. So wonderful. So as we start to head out at the end of the show here, again, what we do is we just encourage you to get involved with us. There is information on wealthmovement.com mentor-schools. That's a place to start, and you get in. Our blogs, which are listed at the end of the video on the show more notes. And I guess one of the other things that we should mention is that next time that we meet, which will be May the 7th, starting at 10 Mountain, which is 9 Pacific and 12 noon Eastern, we will be having the action outcome discuss. The types of mentoring will be forefront in our conversations. And with that, Doug, as we always do, that's near the close of our show. So why don't you take us out?
I encourage us all to embrace the gift of mentoring and make every minute a mentoring minute.